Hello, beautiful people. Happy Tuesday. I'm going to give you all some time to come on in. Happy Tuesday to everybody. Let me take a swig of water. All righty then. Hello. I want to get started. Happy Tuesday. Happy Tuesday evening. Um, my name is Nicole. I am a licensed mental health therapist, and we are going to be continuing. It's day 3, y'all. We're continuing with 30 days, 30 ways to level up your healing. So, we're doing a 30-day challenge where we go deeper into healing, just tossing out some reflection questions. With the goal is I want to go deeper with healing when it comes to trauma. Specifically, like I said, I'm looking for the Ruths, the Esthers, the Deborahs. And before we get started, I just want to say hi to different. So again, if you're seeing me here, hello. This is my IG. Hi. And hi, this is my YouTube and Facebook. So I'll be looking from camera to camera, but y'all got my attention. All right. So I am really after the Ruths, the Deborahs, and the Esthers. And it's interesting, like this morning, when I was waking up, hey, beautiful people, shout out, hey. When I woke up this morning, I kind of had an agenda, because I kind of had my outline of what I wanted to do. And hello, welcome. I had an agenda what I kind of wanted, and I don't know. I'm gonna be real, y'all. I feel like my word of the season is pivot because that's all I've been having to do for the last I don't know how many months is pivot, right? And so I had a pivot. God, he wanted me to go more into kind of like sharing more of my story. And when I kind of got into like what I was gonna be talking about anyway, I was like, oh, very interesting why he wanted me to get more into my story. So, we spent yesterday talking about, different trauma roots and trauma fruits. So, how was that for y'all, to actually sit down if you had time to kind of like look at what were the fruits that were in your life in these different areas? Awesome. Okay, I'm seeing yes, mine is shift the season. Shift, right? That's powerful. Thank you. And hello. It's just different. I feel like God is on the move with some things. But yeah, so when I was looking over my outline, I was like, it's very appropriate, what I want to talk about and why I need to share my story. And so yesterday, we're talking about trauma roots and trauma fruits. And so I was just trying to see, how are we doing with identifying any trauma fruits? Right. And so it was interesting because yesterday I also was talking about, how we look at a traumatic event is two ways is we have to look at it, physiologically, emotionally, but we also have to look at it mentally. Meaning, what is the story that we're telling about this particular trauma event? And then what because of this trauma, what are we telling about ourselves? Like what's the narrative we're creating about ourselves? What are we thinking about ourselves, right? And so what I'll share was and I'll say healing because healing is a process. Again, I think we are all going to be doing for the rest of our lives as God takes us from level to level. But when it came to really getting to the crux of this particular topic, due to my own traumatic background and grief background, I realized I was dealing with a lot of shame. I was introduced into the world really, really early for a child. Things that, honestly, I don't think I should have been exposed to. I was exposed to. And when I actually got around other kids my age, and I was like, wait a minute, you don't know this stuff? Or this is not kind of like, something I felt an element of shame about it. And so what I originally did is that was kind of like the mask that I kind of like took on. Um, and that was, I would say, one of my trauma roots was a root of shame. And here's the thing about shame. So guilt and shame, they work a little bit differently. Guilt is a healthy emotion, but guilt usually addresses actions. It's like what you do. Oh, I made a mistake. I feel guilty about it, right? And so, with that being said, there's a difference between guilt, but then we get into shame. And I'm gonna be real, y'all. Shame is just a different beast. I personally feel. Shame was it doesn't just deal with your actions. It actually usually attacks your identity. So how you know you're usually dealing with a root of shame is not I made a mistake. It's I am the mistake. You know, I did a bad thing. No, it's I am a bad person, right? And so with that being said, I was having this I was as a young child navigating through childhood, teenage years, and even young adult, I was dealing with a lot of shame as my trauma root, right? And so here's the thing with that. When we get into different parts of ourselves that we have not come into terms or come into embracing, sometimes that leads us to mask. So I actually want to talk about that very briefly. Like I said, give me about 15 minutes, but I want to kind of pose some questions for y'all to think about today as we continue to explore, trauma roots, trauma fruits, but also I want to get into some of our narrative work. And shame serves no, it really doesn't, right? Shame actually really doesn't serve any purpose. At least we should know that, right? Um, and shame is part of fear. It really is. Thank you for bringing that up too, because we're going to kind of talk about different masks, because that's actually the definition. So when we talk about masks, just Webster's dictionary is actually it's a covering. It's something that we put on to disguise, to hide, to camouflage, right? And so when you think of costumes, that's a mask. We wear masks, right? But when we talk about emotional and trauma masks, I want you to think of tonight for mask being it is the mask of we tend to wear masks and it's trauma mask due to having a traumatic background or experiencing some type of trauma, and we're trying to prevent ourselves from re-experiencing that. Hi. We're trying to prevent from re-experiencing that type of trauma again, and it is a level of fear involved in that. We're afraid that we may experience, the trauma, which again is going to lead sometimes to the traumatic roots, the trauma roots, which is like I gave some abandonment, rejection. No one wants to experience those type of trauma roots, and so what do? We put on this mask because one thing as human beings, what we gravitate towards is we all have a need to belong, and we all have a need to feel love, right? And so and that is, I want to say that's a core need that we do have. And so in order to survive emotionally, in order to fit in, we may find ourselves putting on masks. All right. So I'll give, for instance, my mask because I was dealing with a root of shame. My mask was perfectionism. Okay, like I told you, I am a recovering perfectionist. I'm a recovering, self-critic. And so my thing was I never wanted to lead to disappointment because I felt like disappointment was an automatic reminder of the shame I was. I was a shameful person. So I never wanted to do anything that would kind of elicit a response where a person would either abandon, walk away, reject, that would make me feel shamed, like I am again a bad person, right? And so I wore this mask of perfectionism. I wore this mask of achieving. And thank you for your honesty. We have another recovering perfectionist in the building too, right? Like anybody else. Um, but yeah, so those were some of the masks that I was faced with. And so I want to give some other masks too, if y'all don't mind me going over. So some of the other masks, you can have a mass of, like I said, of overachieving. There's a mass of perfectionism. There's actually a mass of being happy. Those happy-go-lucky people? And it's great if you are happy go lucky, right? But sometimes that everything's fine, I'm good, is a mask that sometimes you wear. And again, I want to kind of normalize it from a survival standpoint is we wear masks as a defense mechanism. It keeps us from being so vulnerable from touching that sore spot again, because if that sore spot is reminded, chances are the narrative, which again is a false narrative, is going to come back up, right? And so you can have the mask of, and again, mask of pretension. You can have the mask of materialistic things, a mask of success. And how you know that is like everything is materialistic, right? You want to show off that you have all these material things, right? That could be a mask of success that you're using to hide, to cover, facade of happiness. Yes, exactly, right? self, and it really is self preservation. Exactly, it really is, right? But there's different type of masks. You have, like I said, you can have a mask of people pleasing. Okay, right. And that oftentimes, like I said, you're dealing with different roots of abandonment, maybe even rejection too. And I want to, because the end game with people pleasing um, is if I were to say yes to you and do what you want, chances are you're not going to leave, you're not going to walk away, you're not going to judge, right? And so you'll wear these different type of masks. But here's the thing, and this is what I had to discover as I was doing my own healing work, and this is what I want to also offer for you all too, is when it comes to masks, is first ask yourself, what are you trying to hide? I see somebody says, the roots from rejection, abandonment is no joke. And what I want you all to consider too, because the enemy is really good about making sure our seeds get planted in childhood. Have you ever realized that? A lot of things we're healing from is things from the childhood. I came across this meme that said that really healing is about getting back to who you originally were as a child before the world got to you. And I was like, that really is. We hear our inner child come up a lot, right? And so that is actually a part of healing. But one thing I had to really embrace was, what was I afraid of showing? So I really did have to go back to my inner child, that scared inner child, that if people were to see what happened to me, if people were to know, how would they judge me? What would they think? Would they walk away? Right. And so, with that being said, I had to first really get into knowing what was the mask. And that's why I'm going to ask you, what mask are you wearing? Again, check out your fruits. There's probably indication. But what mask could you be wearing? And then I want you to explore it. And when I say explore, I am going to use the word why, but why is never out of defense, meaning why are you like that versus out of curiosity, to be exploratory with this. Like, what is bringing that on? That's the kind of why I want you to. Like, why is this mask necessary for you? What is it hiding for you, you think? But here's the thing. What we have to begin with, especially that's why I asked us to go into the narrative that you're believing about yourself and to challenge that, is because trauma shapes us, but it doesn't define us. But we have to go to the point that it does shape us. So one of my favorite scriptures is about God being the potter, and we're the clay, right? And if you ever had to mold and shape clay in your hands, you got to press, right? And you got to pull, you got to bend, you got to manipulate the clay. Well, if you were the clay, it probably wouldn't feel good to you, right? And so trauma, unfortunately, is something that can occur to us, and it can occur. And even if it is, God's promise is He is going to use it. Right. So what we have to understand is, although it shapes us, and no, unfortunately, we cannot undo anything that's traumatic, as far as like we can't turn back the hands of time and undo the event. What we have to do is now begin to explore with curiosity, how can I use my backstory for me, for others, for my future? Meaning, even though that pressing, that molding, even though it hurt, even though it didn't have to happen, it's there now, right? And so if you look at like a piece of clay and it's turned to pottery, if you step back, you're like, wait a minute, man, that's beautiful. Man, I hate that it had to get pressed here, but you know what? It actually turned out really, really pretty. It turned like it was beautiful, right? What we have to do is we have to recognize and incorporate that our trauma, it shaped us and is now part of our story. But how do we want to use it? We have to give it a new definition, y'all. Exactly. We have to reframe. I love that word. You got to pivot. You got to pivot. You got to reframe. How can you use it? And so by doing that, what I'm going to encourage you to do is, I want you to sit down with your narrative. And I do want you to ask yourself, like, identify the different parts of you. And that part is going to include trauma. So we don't distance ourselves from that part. It's like a piece of a puzzle. That piece makes up the whole entire picture now. But it doesn't have to be something that it's man, it's ugly. Now we have to understand it's a part of it, but I get to use it, and it's going to tell a different painting. It's going to tell a different story. So we have to be willing to embrace all different aspects of ourselves. We call this forms of parts work. Parts work, that there's different components, different parts of you. And sometimes we struggle because we're unwilling to accept this part of us, the part that happened to us. And what I want to encourage you as you continue to identify the narrative that you're believing about yourself is, what parts are you struggling to embrace? That, you know what? That if you were to include, it could set you free. It can set other people free. God was very intentional about telling me that He wanted me to start telling my story. And when I say the more I started telling my story, the more healing I got, the more freeing it got. But to also see other people and be like, man, I need to hear that. I was like, okay, God, that's how you're using it. So, what I want to ask you tonight for reflection, as you explore your narrative, one of the questions is, I want you to ask yourself, who are you really? With the mask off, with the camera off, the lights out, the people gone, you're off your job, the children in bed. Who are you really? What parts of you still remain? What parts do you struggle to accept or embrace? Okay. And then I want you again figure out, how can you pull that part and understand that is part of your backstory, meaning it's part of your storyline. Your backstory is necessary for your future, although it's not necessarily going to make or break your future. It's part of your future. We all have a backstory. And if you're reading a book, sometimes you need to know the context. Like, why is this character like this, right? It makes the plot better. It makes the ending even sweeter, right? If you know the context, the backstory. So that's what I want you all to do for tonight. Okay. Is I want you to get into your narrative. Figure out what parts are you struggling to embrace, especially if it is a result of trauma roots, and how can you begin to embrace it more, and like reframe and identify how this particular trauma, how it's actually going to be used for your good. And the more you're willing to embrace that, y'all, I promise you, the more you will be willing to let go of the mask. Because again, the narrative was always false. You're always worthy. You're always lovable. There is no shame and no condemnation in Christ Jesus whatsoever. Hi. Right? So when I embrace that, I start taking off the mask. Now, it's not going to happen overnight, but layer by layer, if you really are intentional, you will begin to see that these masks, that they're beginning to fade off. Okay? So that is it for today. 17 minutes. I'm getting down. I'm trying to get down to 15 minutes, y'all. Can I be real? I'm trying to get down to really 10 to 15 minutes. But yeah, can't wait to start to chapter 55. My goal, y'all, and I'm grateful that y'all are here. My goal is to build, because I really got a point with this. There's something that God wants. And like I said, I really want, like I said, I'm after the Ruths, the Esthers, and the Deborahs, y'all, because one thing, all of them, they actually had a past. Ruth had a past. Esther had a past. And if they would have got stuck in their past, if they would have got stuck in their backstory, what would have become of them? You know? So that's who I'm after. Women with a past, because God shows us He can use anybody regardless of a past. But we have to begin embracing that past is part of it. We can't distance ourselves. We can't hide who we really are, because it's just a mask. It's temporary. So, all right, y'all, that's going to be it for tonight. We're going to chime in for tomorrow, same time, God willing. All right. Let's do, and you can do some Q&As. If y'all ever have any questions, just pop them in the chat. But that's going to be it for tonight. All right. So, until next time, I'll see y'all. Okay. Don't look back unless you're sharing a testimony. I love that. You know what? I love that expression, because I say that as far as driving, right? Like, we need to use the rear view mirror. Yes, you are, Esther. But to say, to your point though, we do use the rearview mirror, right? Because we need it. However, if we were to drive looking through the rearview, we're gonna crash. So I love it. Rearview mirror, using your rearview mirror is really to gauge where you come from. Check little milestones, but it's never to dwell there. It's never to drive. Using your rearview. But all right, I'm gonna let y'all go. Okay, bye y'all. And for Facebook and YouTube, I'm going to say goodbye to. All right.